So I just added a templating engine to my PuzzleScript tools that I've been developing, which took very little time at all, and it's probably one of the more powerful things I'm going to get out of this. But obviously I wouldn't be able to do it if not for the previous work I did that I showed in the other videos. But yeah, so here I'm running a PuzzleScript game locally using the tools that I showed before. And you'll see I've made a little demo game where there's a little person running around and can push these blocks around, and they don't really do anything, they just push. That's all it is. And to demo the templating engine, I'm going to implement a couple of things. So let's open the file. So you'll see it's called main.ps.njk now. I'll explain that in a second. Let me find the relevant bits. So yeah, right now we have one rule, which is when the player moves. Oh, so I called them things. It's not a great name, but I just was throwing it together quickly. So thing 1 is the red square, thing 2 is the blue square, thing 3 is white, and so on, right? And I've got a rule, which is when the player is moving into a thing, then the player and the thing move, right? That's the pushing rule. So let's say I want to add a feature where if I push two things next to each other, they disappear. And specifically, I want it to be that if I push two things of the same color next to each other, they disappear. Not if I push white next to blue or whatever. So the way you might try and do that naively is, right, if there's a thing next to a thing, then there's no longer a thing next to a thing. We remove them. And so if you do that, save, and you see it auto reloads. That's from the previous stuff I did. And then I start pushing them next to each other. Hey, it works, right? However, you'll see it also removes a blue next to a purple, which is not what I wanted. And if I push the red next to here, oh, it did the red and the pink, and so on. I want it to only remove them if they're the same color. So sadly, the only way you can do that in PuzzleScript, because basically it treats these two things as they're just things. It doesn't matter which kind of thing they are. There's no way of constraining them to be the same thing. So the only way to do that then is to manually write out separate rules for each type of thing. So you can see why this would get tedious. Imagine you had even more things, or imagine you had like many rules like this that had to operate on the things that you have. That would get horrible to manage. So that's where the templating engine comes in. Basically, this file is going to pass through Nunjucks, which is a tool built, I think it's maintained by Mozilla. It's basically like Ginger. I don't know if anybody's used Ginger, but basically it's you pass your file through Nunjucks, and it pre-processes it in some way and spits out the real file that you then use to do, the real PuzzleScript file in this case. And it lets you do things like loops and setting variables and calling functions and doing filters on text and stuff like that. So to demo, let's do a loop. So like if you want to do a kind of a loop or a conditional or a set, like a statement of sorts, you have to put it in this like curly bracket and a percent sign. So for I in range 1 to 7, there are 6 things. This is exclusive. It's like inclusive of the 1, but exclusive of the 7. So that will iterate 1 to 6. And then I do an end for down here. Okay, then I'm going to indent that just because I find it easy to read. I can then do thing I. So this will just iterate 6 times, printing out a different rule each time with a different I. And this just so when you want to substitute text into your file, you just do curly brace, and the name of the variable you want to substitute. And because it's just substituting that text directly in, it's literally just putting 1 in there. So this, when it gets to PuzzleScript, it just sees this as thing 1, then thing 2 and thing 3, etc. So let's save that. Hopefully I did that right. So now if I push white next to white, yep. If I push red next to red and pink, the reds go. If I push pink next to blue, nothing. There we go. Wonderful. Cool. So that's already made things easier. But like, as I said, Nunjucks comes with tons of stuff. The documentation is online. You can read through it, but like, you can do maths and text manipulation and all sorts. Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm going to give another example. It's kind of similar to that one, but whatever. Like it's a common thing I often need to do. So basically, sometimes it's useful to leave a marker behind. Like normally you'd make the marker transparent, but for now I'm making it so that the markers are visible. But to leave a marker behind where something moved into to show what direction it last moved, sometimes that's pretty useful. So in this case, I've got 4 objects called marker up, right, down, and left, and they have a little shape that's pointing in that direction, like the corresponding direction according to its name. And then, so what I want is effectively when I move up, so when the player is moving up into a space, regardless of what's in that space, I want to keep the player moving, but put a marker up in that space, right? So in theory, if I did that right, yeah, when I move up, you can see it leaves a marker facing that direction. But when I move the other directions, it does not. Move up again, it does. Cool. But now, obviously, the issue is if I want to do this for all directions, I'm going to have to copy this multiple times. And again, if I had to do that for many different things, that would become a real pain. So why not use another loop? And in this case, I've actually added a useful kind of globally available variable called directions. So I can just do for direction in directions, indent that, end for, and then just do dir, and then next to marker, also do dir. That's in theory, if I've done it correctly, we now get markers in all directions. Woohoo! Very nice. And I barely had to repeat myself. Oh yeah, one of the other powerful things you get from Nunjucks is like the ability to do macros. So you could write, if there's some kind of computation you have to do frequently, you could write that as a macro and then reuse that throughout your file. But yeah, that's it. In terms of how it works, I mean, I barely did anything, basically. Because of the fact I'm using Webpack to build the PuzzleScript game into a JavaScript file that I can then run in my browser, the way Webpack works is you can tell it to use different they call them loaders, but it's like a processor for a file. So the file will go through that processor before it ends up in your JavaScript code. So in this case, let me check my Webpack config. You'll see that for .ps.njk files, it will use these 2 loaders. There's an array with 2 loaders in it. It does them from bottom to top order. So first of all, it's this one, which means it will use the super Nunjucks loader, which just is a existing library. I didn't make it, it already exists. And this is where I'm passing it that global directions with up, right, down, left in it. And then after that, it's going to go through my PuzzleScript loader. And that's all I had to do. Nunjucks does the rest, like this loader, and Nunjucks itself does everything else. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and maybe I'll have something interesting soon to show. Bye.